So I'm Brittnee.
I'm Andy.
And we're the founders of Remote Collective. And today Andy is going to talk to me about, he's going to interview me about building Remote Collective, the company that we have, and also all the things related to transitioning a team to working remotely. And if you're a company that wants to work remotely, what do you need to know? Or if you're a person, an individual or employee that wants to work remotely, what do you need to know?
Perfect. Okay. Yeah, I think we phase in and out
Coming
existence.
closer.
Yeah, there we go. Perfect. Okay, so let's start with how did you, Brittnee, become a remote worker?
That's a good question. I started working remotely in 2014, so maybe almost 8 years ago. My background's in corporate law, so I worked in a law firm, and I always wanted to work remotely, but I didn't know how to do it. And so I started helping my law firm, my company, as an employee. I helped everything go paperless. So I wrote down all the things that, oh, where did I go? I wrote down all the things that I needed to do in order to be able to create a good system in order to work remotely. And then I offered it to my team, my boss, and I said, these are all the things that we need to do in order to go completely paperless. And I will do it for free. Like, I'll do it as extra work. And they agreed to try. So I spent 6 months internally transitioning our whole systems and our culture. So I became an internal consultant on top of doing all the rest of my work. And it worked out. I was able to move to Costa Rica in 2014. And that started my digital nomad. That's what we call remote workers who travel and work remotely. That's what started my journey in working remotely. And in the last 8 years, I've been able to live in over 50 countries. So I've been able to travel all over the world, meet amazing people, and work remotely. And since then, I've started companies hosting other remote workers, travel companies, and now I do consulting for companies, helping them transition their teams to working remotely.
Yeah, that's an awesome journey. Thank you. So how did you start helping companies transition into remote working?
That's a good question. I was helping launch co-working spaces, so the places where people work remotely.
Mm-hmm.
So I was helping launch those, and then I realized there was a big gap between the people who wanted to work remotely. Like, a lot of my friends or people would reach out to me and say, how do I get a remote job? And I realized that a lot of companies don't have time to they need to do all their everyday work, but they don't have time to step back and ask themselves, how can we transition to offer remote work to our employees? So I started reaching out to companies on LinkedIn and got in contact with a couple that would let me experiment with them. I did some free work for a while, and then it just started taking off like crazy, and people heard about me and they started to reach out to me. And now all of my work comes through word of mouth. So people know me and they know that I'm able to do it successfully, even remote, or we have a team of consultants that work based in Europe. And so they can go and work with companies in person, and then I can do the consulting remotely. So it was a lot of trial and error, but what I found was that companies actually really wanted to offer this to their employees, but they were very overwhelmed with having to do their normal, everyday workload, and they didn't know where to even begin to start on the process of where am I going? They didn't know where to start on the process of starting the remote work. Like, how do we let our employees work remotely? What does that even mean? And I love that. I get really geeky about that, and I get really excited about helping. I believe that most people enjoy their work, but they maybe don't enjoy the way they have to work, like getting on public transportation, going to the office for 8 to 9 hours a day and coming home. Having even a couple days at home a week working remotely can really help your health and wellness for your nervous system. When I lived in the United States, I lived in New York City. So I had to go, it took an hour and a half to get on the subway every day to work. And then I'd work for like 8 to 9 hours a day and then another hour and a half back home. And some days I wouldn't even, I'd be in the office all day while it was sunny, and I'd like wake up while it was dark and go home when it was dark. And it was just like, I didn't want to live that lifestyle. And I also am very inspired to help other companies and other people so that the employees have the option to have a more free and flexible lifestyle.
Mm-hmm. Cool. Sounds great. Mm-hmm. So what are your top tips for companies that are thinking of transitioning to remote work?
If I were to talk to a company that's interested in transitioning, right, I would tell them that it's really important to get what we call a systems and a culture audit. So that's someone who comes in, who's very unbiased, doesn't know you at all, doesn't know your company, and can ask a lot of different questions like, why do you guys do it this way? And how are you able to, like, if someone needs a piece of work done, what is the system from when they ask the employees to get the work done all the way through the workflow of when that project is finished? And what ends up happening is when you do that auditing, it's good for your company anyways, because what I found is a lot of times companies get set up when people are not really paying attention to how efficient they are. So when you come in and have an audit done, it can be very eye-opening how much time and money you can save if you're able to do your systems better and your workflow better. And also from a cultural perspective, I would really highly recommend that teams understand that just giving someone a laptop and having them work remotely is a very different thing than managing them. So like managing your team remotely is very different than managing your team in the office, because in the office you have a lot more, they call it touch points, like points of contact where, they're sitting right next to you, or you can go over and just talk to them really quickly, or you see them in the break room, where you're able to like connect with them throughout the day and talk about projects. Where if you are working remotely, your team is working remotely, a lot of times they won't see you that much. Like you physically are not having opportunities to connect with each other. So from a morale standpoint, like from a happiness standpoint, it's really important to check in and have a lot more communication with your team and just make them feel more connected. So what I found is that the workflow, once you get your systems done and you're able to like have a very efficient workflow system, employees work a lot faster and are able to get their projects done a lot better and more, just like everything just flows a lot better. But what happens is they can feel emotionally and from a health and wellness standpoint, feel isolated, and they miss that contact from being in the office. And so when I work with teams, a lot of my effort actually goes into employee health and wellness, like what makes teams excited and motivated and more connected to each other. Which all around makes the teams want to work there more, and they end up giving better work, for their companies. So in all ways, it's like a really positive, beneficial thing, but it's just a shift in mindset, because I've come in and worked with companies where they think that, it'll take 1 month and they're hoping it takes 1 month, which I mean, I would love that as well. But they don't realize that the most important thing is a mental shift of how they manage their teams. So that's like, if I were to give anyone a tip, that's what I would give them. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it's a really big one. The changes between office and home work life or remote work life.
Yeah.
So yeah, let's flip that. So what would be your top tips for an individual who wants to work remotely?
So if you're an employee who wants to work remotely, or someone who's a freelancer, I'll say employee first. If you're an employee who wants to work remotely, I get so many people, like hundreds and hundreds of people every year reaching out to me saying, how do I get a remote job? Or how do I transition my current job into a remote job? And what I say to them is you need to make it really, really easy for your company to allow you to work remotely. So your employer, your boss, does not have time to, like, if you go to him and say, I want to work remotely, they're probably going to say, that's great, let's talk about it next month. Like they don't have time to, create a whole new process because you want it, even if they do want it. So a lot of times, whatever project needs to get done, that is the thing that is focused on in that moment. So the solution to that is to figure out your own solution for remote work. So if you go into your boss, similar to what I did when I was working in my law firm, and you say, hey, I can help transition you to working remotely. I can help our whole company do this. And this is what I think we should do. So if you have a kind of a plan that you can present to them, and it doesn't have to be anything, super formal. It doesn't need to be very complicated. It can just be like, you can just say, I would like to try and work from home one day this week and see what I'm missing, like see what needs to get changed in the office in order to have all of us work remotely more. And so you can take it as like a trial day where you just work from home and you do as much work as you can. And you, of course, try and do it in the best way that you can to prove to them that you're able to do that. But there's probably going to be things where you realize like, oh, this document is not online. I can't access this thing. And then you are able to, help the company through that practice of you going through it and you taking the lead on helping the team go remote. And I think that is the biggest thing, the tip that I would give to them. And also if you're a freelancer or if you're someone who is looking for a remote job specifically, some tips that I will give is that right now there is way more people who want to work remotely than there are jobs in order for them to work remotely. Like the workforce hasn't shifted enough. So the demand is for more remote jobs, and there's too many people for the jobs. And so when I consult companies on having them hire remote workers, what they tell me that they are looking for, so I'll share with you what they tell me, is there's so many people who are on paper very qualified for the position. So say you're looking for a job as an engineer and you want to do it remotely, and they have the whole team set up where you can work remotely. So you look great on paper and you have all the qualifications, but what they're looking for is someone who is what we call a self-starter. So someone who can manage their own schedule, who is able to, do everything online. And if you don't have any skills already, if you haven't had any chance to practice working online, the thing that can really help you is letting them know that you are a quick learner. And what they really want to know is that you are a positive and happy person to work with, because if they're not going to see you in the office and you're as qualified as everyone else, so the thing that will make you stand out is that you're just a really happy, positive person, and you're really excited to be part of their team. So that means that you've probably researched their company, you've learned their team values as much as possible. So you've learned as much as you can about their team, and you're like, I want to be part of your team. So if you go at it from that angle, instead of you're a company that is offering a remote job, I want a remote job, they have thousands of people applying for the same job. So in order to make you stand out, you have to be human, you have to be real and a nice person and someone who stands out in being very authentic. I think that's it. Do you have anything else?
Yeah, I think finding ways to relate to each other remotely. So whatever that hobby is to you, whether it's movies or TV or games or the sports match, finding something that the rest of your team can talk about and can connect to whilst you're remote, because you can always share a screen, you can always pull people into what you're watching, and keeping those connections going, even when you're talking on the interview, if it's remote, that builds a connection that without it you can miss, and it can just be, hi, I'm going to do the work, bye.
Yeah, I think that human touch, as they say, like the human connection that you can have with your team is so important. And that's really that's what remote teams want. Even though we are not in the same office, we still want to feel connected to each other. So if you are someone who's looking for a job, or if your employer who wants, I don't know where I'm going. If you're an employer who wants to hire a remote worker, that's also something I would look out for, is someone that you would you can easily connect to, because it's a lot harder to work with a team remotely than it is in the office if you don't have that connection. Because otherwise, when there is like some miscommunication or there's just something that goes wrong, if you don't have that human connection, then it's going to be a lot harder to work with each other. So all of it can be easily done and easily solved. It's just a different mindset of looking at it. And I'm really excited to work with teams on this, because I think it's the future. Like, remote work is already here. It's upon us. It's been something that I've been consulting on, working on. I don't know where my screen is going. It's something that I've been consulting on and working on for over 5 or 6 years, even before COVID. So it's okay. So I think it's been really amazing for me to see the transition, like since before COVID, like when people really wanted to work remotely, and I was talking to teams and I was traveling around all over Europe, like working with major companies and helping them build out remote work policies. These are the ones that are now very excited to be campaigning remote work. So that's something that I would really recommend for companies, is to make sure that you have a remote work policy, because if you don't, very quickly you're going to be left behind in today's job market, because the ones who are very qualified and people you actually want to work with, those people are getting picked up really fast. And so and also the younger generation doesn't want to sit in an office anymore. And that's something that I think they already didn't want. And with COVID, it became very obvious that in a lot of ways we can work remotely. And so I think it's beautiful, this transition time. It's like, we have to jump on this now so that we don't fall behind. It looks like you have a question.
Can read this one out. So, is it crucial for companies to invest in digitalization to give responsibility to remote structure?
What do you think they mean by that?
Digitalization to give responsibility to remote structure. Are you referring to digitalization of like project management or sharing content? And
I'm just going to take it as how I am interpreting this question. So someone asked a question and we're going to respond to it on here. If you mean that, it's the responsibility of companies to give everyone a laptop and make sure that they have the tech tools and the digital tools in order to work remotely, I think yes. It depends on what kind of company you are. I mean, so my last job that I had before I started consulting was a major law firm based in New York City. And they invested so much money into our office computers, when in reality, most of us worked on it. We also were all given laptops, like, portable MacBooks. And all of us worked on our Macs because we were able to save everything on there and take it home. And so what I would ask is the amount of money that companies are spending on office overhead, so office expenses, paying for an office, all of the computers that go in the office, can they portion out some of that money and buy computers, all the tech tools? And this is something where I was going back to, is this is the future. And if companies are not getting ahead of this and coming up to full speed, they're going to get left behind really quickly, because most companies that I work with, they already have all the digital tools. They just don't necessarily know how to use them in a remote work setting. So if your company is at a stage where you're overwhelmed by the amount of things that need to get sorted, or tech tools and all these things, what I would say is that most people have a computer at home. Most people have a laptop, and it might be easier to invest in a good security system where they can do a remote login. This is what I had at my job, where I was able to use whatever laptop I wanted. I had a secure remote login on my desktop. I had to do lots of codes with my computer and my phone, and then I was able to log into my work computer. And that could be the first phase. So when you're transitioning to remote, you don't need to do everything all at once. You just need to create a game plan and do phases like phase 1. Maybe everyone already who has their own computers, if you're not able to afford to buy everyone one, and just make sure that they can work remotely. And then phase 2, you give everyone the structure and digital tools. But when it comes to like project management tools and just everything online in order to work remotely, I feel like those are already being used in offices already, like Asana, like, for instance, Slack or Asana or Trello. Those are things that if you're in a modern office today, people are already using that, maybe not in the most efficient way. And that's what someone comes in and consults and audits your company and can help you in order to use them more efficiently, so you can save money or make more money more quickly by getting more projects done faster. And then everything that you buy with your, that you invest in the digital tools and the consulting, everything, all of that gets paid for. So it's just a different way of looking at it. Do you have any more questions for me, or anything you want to add?
No more questions popping through, but we've got a couple of minutes left. So if you have a question, shoot it across. Yeah, just to add to that, I think on what you were saying is every company has a different requirement for when you're looking at digitization. So what software, what product may solve that problem for one company may not work for another. If you're creative, if you're banking, finance, different sectors require completely different security or different styles of file sharing and everything in between. So that's really where, like you were saying, to get a consultant in who's aware of these differences and can overview your company and what works specifically for you. That's the best way to work with it. And hopefully you have a system you're already using, even if it's not so remotely enabled, that you can then move across to a remote setting.
Yeah, and what I will add to that is that it's really, a lot of companies feel very overwhelmed by the idea of transitioning their team to remote, and that's very understandable. But what I want you guys to know is that it is actually a lot easier and a lot cheaper, and it's just a lot easier than you think. If you get some help and you get someone to like walk you through the process. Because what I found is companies will come and do a couple consultations with us, and then they think, oh, I can go do this by myself, and that's fine. I'm like, cool, I fully support. I wish you good luck. And then they come back a couple months later and they're like, we need help us. What is going on? And so for us, that has been an interesting avenue, because we want, as consultants, we want you to be able to do it on your own as quickly as possible. It is like, we have done our job well if you don't need us anymore. And so for us, like, we come in with like a full audit plan, a full systems plan. We have the foundation of what works for, most teams, and then we tailor it to each company and each industry, just like Andy was saying. Because of course, yeah, like from working in a law firm, we had so many more security requirements, legal requirements that we had to adhere to versus maybe a tech company. Those would be very different industries. Yeah, I'm so excited because it really is the future, and I'm so excited to have all of this like come to fruition. Thank you guys so much for having us. Do you have anything else you want to add?
No, I think this was perfect. Yeah, it's really exciting times for remote working. And yeah, looking forward to see what the future holds. Where's the best place to find out about Remote Collective?
Oh yeah. So if you want to find out about us, my name is Brittnee Bond. I don't know if I even said at the beginning. So I'm Brittnee Bond. This is Andy Ward.
Hi.
And we are the Remote Collective. So if you want to find us, you can look up my name on LinkedIn. It's here, it looks like, on the Zoom thing. And also, yeah, how else can they find us? I guess
Facebook,
Instagram.
at Remote Collective.
Yeah. So you can find us in many places, and we are very available, and we really want to support everyone who wants to work remotely, whether it's a company or an employee or a freelancer. So please reach out if you're interested in learning more, and we fully support you guys on your remote work journey. Bye, guys.
Okay, bye.